Hey guys, tonight you find yourself beneath the old west gate of a walled town at dusk, with cold stone pressing its damp breath against your cheeks, straw clinging to your boots, smoke hanging in the rafters of the gatehouse like a tired grey curtain, and the last bell of evening trembling somewhere beyond the roofs. The road behind you is a ribbon of mud, rutted by carts and shining in the torchlight, and the horse beside you breathes white clouds into the winter air as if it is quietly judging every decision that brought you here. River mist crawls low through the archway. The guards' cloaks smell of wet wool and old leather, and somewhere a dog barks with the confidence of an animal who has never paid a market toll in his life. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience, mostly by forgetting to mention the puddles, the fleas, and the way every doorway seems designed to bruise your shoulder. You probably would not last a week out here, not because you lack courage, but because courage is less useful than knowing which inn waters its ale, which bridge has loose planks, and which saint is supposed to help when your left boot gives up during a rainstorm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there, because somewhere in your world a lamp is glowing too, and that feels close enough to kinship for tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand just inside the gate as the town closes itself for the night. The great oak doors groan behind you, iron bands black with rain, and the gatekeeper lowers the bar with the slow care of a man shutting out wolves, thieves, debts, and probably several cousins. The sound rolls through the stone passage, deep and final, and for a moment you feel the town become an island. Outside lie fields, hedges, marsh tracks, lonely shrines, and the long road where travellers swear they hear bells from abbeys that burned 100 years ago. Inside lie narrow lanes, smoky kitchens, alehouse benches, market stalls under canvas, and 100 small trades that keep the dark from swallowing ordinary life. Though the theme of this place belongs to forgotten jobs of Victorian England, the night wraps them in an older cloak. Everything here feels borrowed from another age, the cobbles slick as monastery tiles, the rushes scattered over tavern floors, the beeswax candles burning with soft yellow halos in upper windows. The town may mutter with later habits, newer tools, and streets crowded by strange labour, but under it all beats the same old heart of stone, hunger, bell, fire, and sleep. You trudge forward beneath hanging signs that creak in the mist. A painted boot swings above a cobbler's door. A wooden fish dangles outside a shop that smells strongly enough to make fasting seem wise. A red cloth hangs near a tavern entrance, though no one can quite agree whether it promises good ale, bad company, or simply a roof that leaks less than the neighbours. Beneath the eaves, gutters drip steadily into barrels. A woman in a fur-lined cloak hurries past with a basket under one arm and a keyring at her belt, each iron key knocking softly like tiny bells. She does not look at you, but she steps around the puddles with the confidence of someone who knows every treacherous stone in town. At the edge of the square, an old man kneels to gather fallen rushes from a doorway. He ties them with twine and mutters that clean rushes keep away sickness, though some swear it is not the rushes but the sweet herbs mixed among them, lavender, meadow sweet, a little rosemary if the household has money enough to smell respectable. You watch him tuck the bundle under his arm, and he gives you a nod, as if you too are simply another damp object brought in from the road. The market is folding itself inward. Traders pull canvas over their stalls. A fishwife counts coins by candle stub. A baker scrapes dark crumbs from a board. saving even the burnt bits for someone who will be grateful by morning. Near the market cross, a boy with a cracked lantern waits under the dripping arm of a stone saint. The saint's nose has been worn away by weather, kisses, or possibly disappointed prayers. No one can quite agree whether the statue once held a relic in its base, though the older folk say a tooth of St. Clement was kept there until a rat carried it off, which seems unfair to both the saint and the rat. You warm your hands briefly over a brazier outside the toll booth. The guard beside it eats coarse bread from a wooden trencher and dips it into pottage so thick the spoon stands upright, a small miracle more dependable than many official ones. He tells a porter to move along, tells a cart driver to pay double for entering late, and tells the dog at his feet absolutely nothing, because the dog has already decided it owns the place. That dog, lean and mud-coloured, glances at you once, sneezes, and begins following at a distance. This is not comforting, but it does feel historically accurate. The lanes narrow as you leave the square. Upper stories lean toward one another, almost touching, as though the houses are exchanging gossip over your head. From open shutters come scents of smoked fish, tallow, boiled onions, damp wool, and wood smoke. Somewhere a baby frets. Somewhere a lute plucks 3 uncertain notes and then gives up. From a chapel at the far end of the lane, a bell rings again, smaller than the gate bell, thinner and more patient. It marks the hour for prayer, or supper, or closing shop, depending on whose stomach you ask. You begin to notice the workers of the evening, the people whose names do not sit proudly on carved signs. A woman carries a bucket of ash for scouring. A thin youth scrapes muck from a crossing with a worn broom. 2 men guide a cart stacked with rags, cracked pots, bones, and metal scraps that glimmer faintly under the rain. A lamplighter in a dark cap checks his pole near the chapel wall, waiting for the streets to deepen into proper shadow. These are not knights, abbots, queens, or famous merchants. Their hands are chapped, their backs are bent, their work is humble enough to be ignored until it stops, and then everyone complains loudly, which is perhaps the oldest civic tradition. You duck beneath a low arch into a lane where the stones are patched with straw to soften the mud. A widow leans from a window and shakes crumbs onto the sill for birds, though she whispers that the first sparrow to arrive carries news from the dead. Even now, it is hard to tell whether she believes this fully, or whether lonely evenings simply make wings seem meaningful. Below her, a boy hurries by with a covered basket of rushlights, each one a reed dipped in fat, cheap and smoky and precious to those who cannot afford beeswax. He shields them as if carrying sleeping moths. A tavern door opens, and warmth spills out in a golden breath. Inside, you glimpse soot-black rafters, wet cloaks steaming near the hearth, and men hunched over cups of ale. Someone laughs softly, not with merriment exactly, but with the relief of sitting down. The floor is strewn with rushes, and a cat moves through them like a small grey ghost, hunting crumbs or dignity. The tavern keeper eyes you through the smoke, weighing whether you're a customer, a pilgrim, a problem, or all 3. In medieval towns, these categories overlap more often than anyone admits. You do not stop yet. The night has only begun its slow opening. The old gate is behind you, the market is dimming, and the town's hidden workers are stepping into their hours. They pass through fog and torchlight, carrying lanterns, brooms, baskets, poles, hooks, bells, sacks, and secrets. Some swear that if you follow such workers long enough, you learn the true map of a town, not the proud streets named for guilds and saints, but the back ways of hunger, warmth, filth, luck, and survival. So you pull your cloak closer Feel the mud soften under your boots, and follow the cracked lantern waiting near the stone saint, while the suspicious dog pads after you, silent as a thought you cannot quite shake. You follow the boy with a cracked lantern into the foggy lane, where the town seems to narrow itself around the little flame he carries. His lamp is no grand brass thing, no polished treasure from a merchant's hall, but a battered frame of horn panes and bent metal, patched at one corner with twine and hope. Inside it, the flame shivers whenever the wind slips between the houses, and the boy lifts his shoulder to shield it as if protecting a small bird from rain. He is a link boy, though here in the old dusk of this half-medieval town, the name feels less like a job and more like a tiny bargain with darkness. He carries light for those who can pay a coin, guiding them through streets where gutters run deep, doorways hide loose stones, and not every shadow belongs to a barrel. In later cities, boys like him wait outside theatres, taverns, and coffee houses. Here, he waits near chapels, alehouses, bridge stairs, and the market cross, offering his lantern to travellers who would rather not discover a ditch with their face. You walk behind him as he leads a wool merchant and his tired apprentice toward the lower street. The merchant wears a fur-lined cloak, damp at the hem, and keeps one hand clamped over the pouch at his belt. His apprentice carries a roll of cloth wrapped in the oiled canvas, and by the way he stumbles, you suspect the cloth is either very valuable or he has been awake since Candlemas. The link boy does not speak much. He simply lifts the lantern before every turn, pauses at every broken drain, and taps his heel twice when the path dips. It is a language of small warnings, and you learn it slowly. The fog thickens near the old toll arch. Water drips from its carved stones, and two worn faces stare down from the moulding above one saint, one king, though no one can quite agree which is which. The town keeps both, just in case. A toll clerk sits under the arch with a cloak over his knees, counting late coins by the light of a beeswax candle set in a clay cup. Beeswax is too good for this damp little booth, and he looks at it with the guilty pleasure of a man enjoying luxury while pretending it is merely practical. Beside him hangs a string of pilgrim badges, little stamped tokens from shrines near and far a shell, a tiny bell, a saint's hand, a bottle-shaped charm said to have touched holy oil. Some swear that wearing three at once protects against fever, theft, and bad lodging, though it does very little against rain. The boy guides you beneath the arch, and the merchant mutters about the toll being higher after dusk. The clerk replies that darkness itself must be maintained, which is a bold argument for a man sitting in a booth with a hole in the roof. You almost admire him. Bureaucracy, like mildew, thrives in damp stone. Beyond the arch, the lane bends sharply around a shrine tucked into the corner of a wall. A painted virgin peers from a niche blackened by candle smoke, her blue robe faded to the colour of old rain. Someone has left a crust of coarse bread there, someone else a bent pin, and someone more ambitious. A tiny wax foot moulded as an offering for healing. Medieval devotion has a practical streak. If your foot aches, you bring a foot. If your cow limps, you might bring a wax cow. Though this creates storage problems even saints must find tiresome. The link boy lowers his head as he passes. Not quite a bow, not quite habit. The apprentice crosses himself with the hand not holding the cloth. The merchant pretends not to notice the shrine but walks wider around it. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether crossroads are unlucky because spirits gather there, or because people dump things there, argue there, and get lost there. Perhaps both explanations are true enough for a wet evening. The boy whispers that you never spit at a crossroad after dark, unless you want the night to remember your name. He says it so calmly that no one laughs. You continue along the guttering lane. The lantern's glow pushes forward in a soft oval, catching details and letting them go, a dropped glove stiff with mud, a cat's eyes under a cart, a row of wet shutters, a rope of onions hanging beside a door. Through one open window you glimpse a family at supper, eating pottage from wooden bowls while a woman lays fresh rushes near the hearth. She scatters dried rosemary and a pinch of rue among them for sweetness and protection. Some swear rue keeps away plague, some say it turns aside envy, and some simply like the smell better than old boots. In a house with 6 people, 2 hens, damp wool, and a smoky fire, any improvement is welcome. The boy's feet know the town better than any map. He avoids the broad street where apprentices spill out of taverns, and instead takes a passage so narrow your shoulder brushes cold plaster. The wall leaves a pale smear on your cloak. Above you, the upper stories lean close, their beams dark from weather, their windows bright with tiny lights. Somewhere behind a shutter, an ink-stained scribe coughs and scrapes his quill across parchment, probably copying a legal record that will ruin someone's morning. You smell oat gall ink, sour beer, and wet hay from a nearby stable. At the end of the passage, an old woman waits with a covered basket and a staff. She pays the boy with a coin so small it seems embarrassed to be money. He nods and turns his lantern for her. She's going only as far as the baker's corner, she says, but the stones are slick, and her knees are older than the church roof. You fall in behind them, moving slowly now. The suspicious dog follows too, still silent, pausing once to sniff the wax foot at the shrine with professional skepticism. The old woman tells you, without being asked, that lantern boys sometimes carry more than light. They carry news of who is sick, who is courting, who has pawned a cloak, who has watered the ale, and who slipped home by the wrong door. In a town like this, gossip moves faster than horses and costs less to stable. The link boy listens, face calm, because the first rule of carrying a lantern is learning when to look away. The second rule, apparently, is never let a drunk man hold the flame. This seems wise. Humanity has many gifts, but steady hands after ale are not always among them. You reach the baker's corner, where warmth seeps through the wall and the air smells of crust, ash, and rye. The baker's boy, red-eyed from night work, opens the door just wide enough to pass out a wrapped loaf. Behind him, you see the oven mouth glowing dull orange, like a sleepy beast with excellent employment. The old woman tucks the loaf into her basket and murmurs a blessing for the link boy. He looks down, pretending not to be pleased. The fog grows colder as the evening deepens. The merchant and apprentice have vanished toward their lodging. The old woman disappears behind a blue-painted door. For a moment you stand with the link boy at the corner, the lantern between you, the flame ticking softly in its horn cage. He tells you there are lanes he will not take after midnight, not for a farthing, not for 2. One runs behind the old charnel yard, another passes a house where a bell rings though the room is empty. No one can quite agree whether the bell is haunted, loose in the wind, or rung by a servant with a cruel sense of humour. In this town, all 3 are possible. Then he lifts the lantern again, and you move on. Ahead, the lane widens toward a crossing deep in mud, where cartwheels have churned the road into a shining brown mire. A figure waits there with a broom, thin as a reed, and patient as a monk at matins. The link boy's flame catches the wet bristles, the hunched shoulders, the careful stance of someone who works where everyone else steps. The boy pauses, nods to the sweeper, and the little lantern glows between them like a quiet greeting. Behind you, from far across the roofs, the evening bell fades into mist, and the dog settles at your heel as if he has decided, without asking, that your journey is now his business too. You stand at the muddy crossing while the link boy's lantern throws a trembling circle of light across the road, and the crossing sweeper leans on his broom as if it is both tool and walking stick, both livelihood and loyal friend. He is narrow-shouldered, wrapped in a patched cloak that has forgotten its original colour, with a cap pulled low and a scarf wound around his neck against the wet. The broom in his hands is made of bundled twigs bound tight with cord, worn slantwise from long use, and when he drags it through the muck it makes a soft, gritty whisper, like rain speaking under its breath. Here the lane is not simply dirty, it is enthusiastic. Cartwheels have churned the mud into shining ridges. Straw, dung, onion skins, spilled ash, and the sad remains of someone's cabbage leaf float together in a mixture no poet has ever praised honestly. Medieval streets do not believe in separating life into tidy categories. The stable, the market, the kitchen, the gutter, and the boot all share one long conversation, mostly underfoot. The sweeper gives the link boy a nod, then turns to you with the cautious politeness of a man who knows people often see his broom before they see his face. For a halfpenny, he clears a path through the crossing, scraping aside the worst of the mire so gentlefolk, merchants, and anyone pretending to be cleaner than they are may pass without sinking to the ankle. In later streets of Victorian England, crossing sweepers stand near busy roads and hope for coins from ladies with fine hems. Here, under torchlight and chapel bells, the work feels older than that, as if every town since the first wall was built has needed someone to argue with mud. He begins with a practiced rhythm: pull, lift, shake, sweep, pull, lift, shake, sweep. The lantern lights the wet arc of his broom, water beads on his sleeves. The dog watches him closely, perhaps admiring the technique, perhaps wondering why any creature would voluntarily move filth without eating it afterward. A woman approaches from the upper lane, carrying a basket of eggs beneath her cloak. She pauses, lifts her skirt slightly, and waits as the sweeper clears a narrow brown channel across the stones. Her shoes are wooden pattens, raised on little supports to keep her feet above the worst of the street. They clack when she steps, awkward but useful, and you think they may be the closest thing this town has to optimism. She drops a coin into the sweeper's palm, murmurs thanks, and crosses with solemn care. Halfway across, one egg cracks in the basket anyway. The sweeper winces as if personally betrayed by poultry. No one can quite agree whether sweeping a crossing brings luck to the sweeper or steals it from those who pass. An old carter under the arch swears that if a sweeper brushes the mud from your left boot before sunrise, you will avoid quarrels all day. A washerwoman nearby says this is nonsense and only works on the right boot. The link boy says nothing, which makes him seem wiser than both. You move closer to the wall, where a little recess holds a bowl of sand and a stub of candle before a painted saint. The flame has gone out, but the wax still smells faintly sweet. Beside it lies a bunch of dried herbs tied with red thread betony, yarrow, and something sharp you cannot name. The sweeper tells you people leave such bundles to keep the crossing from turning unlucky. Crossings are places of choice, and choices make people nervous. A path may lead to market, monastery, marriage, debt, or a cousin who wants help moving barrels. Truly, danger has many forms. The rain grows lighter, but colder. Drops fall from the eaves in steady ticks. From the alehouse behind you comes a rumble of laughter, then a cough, then a brief argument about whether watered ale should still count as ale or merely a disappointing pond. The door opens and warmth rolls out with the smell of smoke, sour beer and wet wool. A man steps into the lane, sees the crossing, sees the sweeper, and suddenly remembers dignity. He pays before attempting the mud. The sweeper works without hurry. His hands are cracked at the knuckles, blackened beneath the nails, but his motions are almost graceful. He knows where the water gathers, where the stones sink, where a loose cobble waits beneath the brown surface like a little trap set by the town itself. He points it out to you with the broom handle. You step around it, grateful. It would be a poor end to your evening to be defeated by geology in soup form. As you wait, the link boy rests his lantern on a hook jutting from the wall. Its flame glows through horn panes clouded by scratches, and for a while everyone at the crossing becomes softer, the sweeper's tired face, the eggwoman's careful hands, the carter's beard beaded with rain, the dog's muddy paws. The town seems less like a place of stone and more like a breathing creature, damp and smoky and full of small labours. It survives because people bend their backs in corners where no herald sings. The sweeper tells you that before market mornings, he sometimes finds odd things in the mud-broken buckles, bent pins, lost beads, farthings, pilgrim badges, once even a little silver ring with a blue glass stone. Some swear such finds belong to the fair folk if discovered before the first bell, and should be left where they lie. The sweeper says fair folk have never once paid rent, bread money, or winter tax, so he feels no great obligation to them. This is perhaps not theology, but it is difficult to argue with. A cart comes grinding toward the crossing, pulled by a weary horse whose mane is clotted with rain. The driver clicks his tongue, and the sweeper steps aside as the wheels enter the mire. The cart carries sacks of charcoal and a bundle of firewood tied down with the rope. As it passes, one wheel sinks deep, and for a moment the whole thing tilts dangerously. You and the link boy both move without thinking, hands to the sideboard, boots sliding, shoulders braced. The sweeper wedges his broom handle under the rim with surprising strength. The driver curses softly, then apologizes to the saint in the wall, just in case the saint is listening more closely than usual. Together, you rock the cart free. Mud sucks at the wheel, then releases with a sound far too personal for polite company. The horse snorts. The driver gives the sweeper a coin and a piece of coarse bread from his pouch, which the sweeper accepts with a nod. He breaks a corner from the bread and tosses it to the dog. The dog catches it neatly and, in that instant, appears to transfer all loyalty from you to the sweeper. Such is the fickleness of beasts, and possibly friends. When the cart has gone, the crossing is worse than before. Deep ruts cut through the path, and water fills them at once. The sweeper looks at the mess, sighs, and begins again. There is no bitterness in it, only the tired patience of someone who knows that most work worth doing must be done more than once. Floors gather rushes again, candles burn down again, bells must be rung again, bread must be baked again, and mud, with frankly impressive devotion, returns. You cross at last over the path he has cleared. Your boots still sink a little, but not enough to shame you. On the far side, you look back. The link boy lifts his lantern in farewell to the sweeper, whose broom moves steadily in the rain. Behind him, the shrine candle catches again, coaxed by someone unseen inside the wall niche, and its little light trembles beside the muddy road. Ahead, The lane dips toward poorer alleys where broken pots glint near drains. Old cloth hangs from lines under eaves, and a cart piled with rags and bones waits in shadow. The man beside it raises a hook in greeting, quiet as a crow at dusk. The dog, having forgiven you for not being bred, trots after your heels again, and the smell of wet wool follows you down into the darker street. You descend into the poorer alley where the cart waits in shadow, and the man beside it lowers his hook with a small nod, as though you have arrived for an appointment made by the mud itself. His cart is narrow, two-wheeled, and patched with mismatched boards. Its handles are wrapped in old cloth to spare his palms, though his palms look far beyond sparing. In the cart lies a kingdom of cast-offs torn rags, cracked bottles, rusted buckles, bent spoons, bones scrubbed pale by rain. A broken lantern frame, a shoe with no partner, and a kettle so dented it seems to have survived a private war. He is the rag and bone man, though in this town he might as well be called the keeper of second chances. He gathers what others throw away, trades it, sorts it, sells it, and somehow turns ruin into supper. Nothing in his cart is noble. Nothing gleams like treasure, except when the lantern catches a bottle shard and makes it briefly look like an emerald fallen from a queen's crown. This is misleading, of course. Most things are less royal after you pick them out of a drain. The link boy holds his flame higher while the rag and bone man rummages with his hook. He lifts a strip of wool, shakes rain from it, and judges it by touch. Good enough for paper makers, he says. Old rags can become pulp. Pulp can become sheets. Sheets can become records, prayers, accounts, letters, or warrants no one wants to receive. It is strange to think that someone's torn sleeve may one day carry a monk's careful ink or a merchant's complaint about fish prices. No one can quite agree whether that counts as rebirth, but it is certainly practical. You follow him along the alley as he calls softly beneath windows, not loud enough to wake the respectable, only loud enough for those already listening. Rags, bones, bottles, he murmurs, voice low and worn. A shutter opens above. A woman lowers a basket on a rope-old linen, a cracked cup, 2 bones from supper, and a handful of bent pins wrapped in cloth. He inspects the offering by lantern light, drops a few small coins into the basket, and tugs the rope. The basket rises again like a cautious moon. The dog sniffs the bones in the cart with deep professional interest. The rag and bone man points at him with the hook and says, gently, that those bones are spoken for. The dog sits, disappointed but dignified. This lasts 3 full breaths, which is impressive. The alley smells of damp plaster, cabbage water, ash, stale straw, and the faint sourness of old leather. Rushes have been swept into the gutter, blackened with use, and a girl with bare hands gathers them into a sack for kindling. In doorways, little charms hang from nails, red thread tied around rowan twigs, horseshoe scraps, pierced coins, and once the dried foot of a hare, which looks less lucky for the hare than advertised. Some swear such things turn aside envy, fever, or the evil eye. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the charms protect the houses, or whether they simply comfort the people inside, which is its own kind of protection. The rag and bone man stops at a yard behind a cook shop. There, by the glow of a half-burned candle, servants have left a tub of scraps mutton bones, torn cloth used for straining, cracked wooden bowls, and bits of metal too small for pride. He sorts everything calmly. Bones for glue makers and button cutters, rags for paper, metal for melting or mending, bottles for reuse if the neck is sound. old rope for caulking cracks. He knows the hidden appetite of every trade. The town eats, breaks, stains, spills, burns, and loses. He gathers the remains and feeds them back into the town's many mouths. A boy from the cook shop brings him a heel of coarse bread smeared with dripping, and the rag and bone man accepts it with the solemn gratitude due to a feast. He tears off a corner and, after a moment of negotiation with himself, gives it to the dog. The dog receives this as proof of a just universe. You begin to suspect the dog is not following you at all, but following an emerging trail of bread. Beyond the cookshop yard, the lane opens briefly beside the back wall of a monastery storehouse. The stones there are older, colder, and greener with moss. A narrow window glows from within, and you see the silhouette of an ink-stained scribe bending over a desk. His candle is beeswax, not tallow, and burns with a steadier, sweeter light. The rag and bone man lifts a bundle of linen scraps and nods toward the window. Monks buy rags, too, he says. Holy words need humble beginnings. You hear the faint scratch of quill on parchment, and then the small toll of a monastery bell marking the late hour. The sound drifts over roofs, through mist, across the wet lanes you've already walked. It seems to gather the crossing sweeper's broom, the link boy's lantern, the toll clerk's candle, the old woman's loaf, and the dog's soft paws into one long breathing rhythm. The town is settling, but not sleeping. Not yet. At a corner shrine, the rag and bone man pauses. This one is smaller than the last, built into a crumbling wall with a clay lamp burning before a saint whose painted eyes have faded unevenly, giving him the look of a man who has heard too many excuses. Someone has placed 3 buttons on the ledge, all different sizes. The rag and bone man does not take them. He says offerings left at shrines are not scraps, even if they look like scraps. Some swear a man who steals from a saint will lose the use of his thumbs. He flexes his own thumbs thoughtfully and says he needs them. You move on, and he tells you, in the mild voice of someone repeating old weather, that bones are boiled for grease, ground for fields, carved into handles, shaped into buttons, or sold to those who know what to do with them. Bottles go to apothecaries if clean enough, to taverns if lucky, to boys with slings if not. Rags may become paper, mattress stuffing, cleaning cloths, or bandages for the barber surgeon, who keeps leeches in jars and has great confidence in vinegar. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether vinegar cures more ailments than it causes complaints, but everyone agrees it smells important. A drunk man leans from a tavern doorway and offers the rag and bone man a broken stool. The man inspects it, taps one leg, and says it has already given all it can. The drunk man looks wounded on the stool's behalf. You cannot blame him. Everyone wants to believe they are still useful, even furniture. Rain begins again, fine as breath. The cart wheels hiss through shallow puddles. The link boy walks close, lantern tucked beneath his cloak when the wind rises. The rag and bone man's hook catches a bit of chain from the gutter, then a cracked pilgrim badge shaped like a shell. He rubs mud from it with his thumb. Perhaps it came from a road to a far shrine. Perhaps from a stall selling holiness by the dozen. No one can quite agree whether badges hold blessing after they are lost. But he slips it into a separate pouch, not with the bones or rags, and you notice he does not joke about it. At last, near the edge of a tanner's lane, he stops beneath a leaning shed. The smell here changes before the street does sharp, sour, heavy, mixed with wet hides, smoke, bark, and things better left unnamed in polite halls. He covers his cart with sacking and ties it down carefully. Tomorrow, much of what he has gathered will be weighed, traded, boiled, scraped, pulped, or remade. Tonight, it rests in a heap under rain. You stand with him a moment, listening to water drip from the shed roof. The link boy's flame burns low. The suspicious dog curls beneath the cart, nose on paws, as if the bones have sung him a lullaby. The rag and bone man looks toward the tanner's dark yard and says dawn comes early for those who gather what others refuse to touch. Beyond the shed, the lane dips toward a colder quarter, where the stink of hides waits under the fog, and somewhere before sunrise another forgotten worker will begin a trade. Even the mud seems reluctant to mention. You pull your cloak tighter, keep the half-burned candle glow in memory, and follow the sour wind toward morning. You rise before light in the sour quarter of the town, where the fog lies thick over the tanner's lane, and the stones under your boots feel cold enough to remember every winter they have endured. The rag and bone man's shed is behind you now, half lost in mist, and the dog emerges from beneath the cart with a stretch, a yawn, and the grave expression of one who has spent the night guarding civilization from unattended bones. Somewhere beyond the roofs, a monastery bell gives its first thin warning of dawn, not yet cheerful, not yet clear, merely awake because duty has very little interest in comfort. The lane ahead smells of wet hides, bark, old smoke, sour pits, ash, and the sort of work respectable noses pretend happens somewhere else. The tanners are not yet fully at their vats, but their yard is already breathing. Hides hang stiff from beams, tubs sit under lean-to roofs, and bundles of oak bark wait to be ground for the dark liquor that turns skin into leather. In another street, a nobleman may later admire a fine glove or a polished boot without thinking too deeply about the path that brought it into being. This is kind of him, and also extremely convenient. Near the yard gate, a figure bends low with a sack and a little wooden paddle. He moves carefully along the gutters, searching the damp corners where dogs have been before him. This is the Pure Finder, though the name is one of those jokes history tells with a perfectly straight face. What he gathers is called pure, not because it is pure in any spiritual sense, but because tanners use it to soften hides. No one can quite agree whether the word began as trade slang, a cruel jest, or proof that people will rename almost anything if it helps them sell it. You keep a respectful distance, which is easy, because respect and distance become close friends in this lane. The Pure Finder wears a patched cloak tied with cord, and his hands are wrapped in strips of cloth. Beside him hangs a small pouch of ash and herbs, which he says helps cut the smell. Some swear wormwood is best, others prefer rue, and one old tanner insists a clove held under the tongue protects the stomach. You suspect the clove mostly gives the sufferer something else to think about. But in hard trades, that is no small mercy. He nods to you without embarrassment. Work is work, his look says, and hunger has never been delicate. He scrapes, lifts, drops the findings into his sack, then sprinkles a little ash over the place. The dog watches with horror, as if witnessing a sacred boundary crossed. This seems unfair from a creature who sniffed shrine offerings yesterday, but dogs are complicated theologians. The sky over the roofs begins to pale, not blue yet, only a thinning of black into grey. A woman opens a shutter above and tips out dirty water with a warning cry, late enough for politeness, early enough to be dangerous. The Pure Finder steps aside without looking up. He has the instincts of a soldier, though his battlefield is mostly gutters. The splash hits the stones beside him and runs in a shining stream toward the drain. "Bless you," he mutters, in a tone suggesting the blessing is under review. You walk with him toward the back of the tanner's yard, where a narrow gate stands open. Inside, one apprentice stirs a vat with a pole, his sleeves rolled despite the cold, his arms reddened by work. Hides lie soaking in lime pits, stretched over beams, weighted in tubs, scraped on curved boards. Bark chips cling to the ground. A stack of finished leather rests beneath a cloth, dark and smooth, almost handsome, and all the more strange because you now know something of its beginning. The pure finder trades his sack at a side shed. A tanner's wife weighs it with a practised eye and pays him in coins, a heel of coarse bread and a small cup of thin ale. He drinks slowly, warming his fingers around the cup. In the dimness, you notice a charm nailed over the shed door, an old horseshoe, a strip of red cloth, and a tiny bone tied with thread. Some swear tanneries attract ill luck because they deal in dead skins and strong smells. Others say the real danger is slipping into a vat before breakfast. Both beliefs encourage careful walking. The tanner's wife gives the dog a look. The dog gives her a look back. No bread appears. Their negotiations fail. You stand near a brazier where damp wood smokes more than it burns. Its heat is weak, but after the lane it feels generous. The pure finder tears his bread in half and eats with slow bites, chewing as if each mouthful deserves attention. His face is lined, his eyes red from cold, yet there is a steadiness about him. He knows every alley where dogs roam, every inn-yard where scraps are thrown, every stable door, every cook-shop drain, every place where the town leaves useful ugliness behind. Like the rag-and-bone man, he reads value in what others avoid. He tells you that children sometimes follow him for a laugh, until the smell teaches them discipline. He tells you some householders leave small piles near the gutter on purpose, wrapped in straw, because even poor trades have arrangements. He tells you a certain barber once claimed the same substance, dried and mixed with vinegar, could draw poison from a bite. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the barber believed this, or simply owned too much vinegar and too little shame. Beyond the yard, the bell rings again. Lord's, perhaps. The sound floats over the roofs and into the tanner's lane, softening even this place for a breath. You imagine the monks in their cold choir, hoods drawn close, chanting by candlelight while their own shoes, belts, book clasps, and bindings owe something to yards like this. Holy books often wear leather covers. Pilgrims wear leather shoes. Knights sit on leather saddles. Everyone depends on the trades they prefer not to smell. The pure finder finishes his ale and rises. Dawn has not yet fully broken, and there are more lanes to search before the town's carts and feet scatter everything into mud. You follow him a little farther, past the yard wall and into a narrow passage where frost silvering the edges of puddles begins to melt. A boy carrying kindling hurries by, holding his nose too obviously. The pure finder only smiles. In a town of hard work, dignity is sometimes the art of not answering. At a corner, you pause by a roadside shrine no higher than your waist. A chipped stone saint stands inside, one hand raised, the other missing entirely. Someone has tucked a sprig of evergreen into the niche, perhaps for winter blessing, perhaps because the saint looked cold. The pure finder places a bent pin beside it. He says pins are good offerings for small protection, safe steps, sound hands, no sickness in the house. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether saints prefer gold or humble things, but most people with little money hope very strongly for the second. The fog begins to lift, showing roofs beaded with rain, smoke rising from kitchens, and the pale line of the town wall. The link boy is gone now, his lantern no longer needed, though you remember its small flame at every turning. The crossing sweeper's broom will already be moving in the market road. The rag and bone cart will wait beneath its sacking. The town's hidden work overlaps like bells rung from different towers, each humble sound entering the next. Then, from a lane behind shuttered houses, comes a slow wooden creak and the dull roll of wheels. The pure finder glances that way and makes a face, not of disgust exactly, but recognition. There are trades below his trade, hours darker than his hour. Carts that come before respectable breakfast and vanish before the market pretends the streets were always tolerable. You thank him with a nod because words feel too bright for the dawn he inhabits. He lifts his paddle in farewell and turns back toward the gutters, patient and practical as the day begins. You follow the sound of the wheels instead, where a covered cart moves through mist with two silent men beside it, and the town holds its breath around work it needs but will never praise. You follow the slow wooden creak into the lane behind the shuttered houses, where the dawn remains thin and grey, and the town seems to pretend it is still asleep. The cart ahead moves without bells, without calling, without the cheerful clatter of market wheels. It is covered with dark sacking, drawn by a mule whose ears droop with the ancient patience of animals employed before sunrise. Two men walk beside it with long-handled tools over their shoulders and cloths tied across their mouths. They do not hurry, they do not speak, their work has its own pace, and that pace is careful. This is the night soil cart, though the name tries very hard to sound more polite than the truth. It gathers what households, inns, yards, and privies must surrender before the day can dress itself in better manners. Every town has such a cart, whether it admits it or not. Castles have their guard-robes, monasteries their reredaughters, cottages their pits, and crowded streets their less elegant arrangements. Humanity may build towers, paint saints, copy beautiful manuscripts, and argue theology by candlelight, but it must also find someone willing to empty the bucket. You keep behind the cart at a distance that feels both respectful and wise. The dog, usually curious about every earthly scent, walks beside you with unusual solemnity, as though even he recognizes a professional boundary. The men stop at a narrow door beside a nail house. One knocks softly with the handle of his tool. After a moment, a sleepy servant opens and hands out a little horn lantern, its flame nearly spent. He points toward the yard without meeting anyone's eye. The men pass through, and you hear the muffled scrape of lids, the dull slosh of labour, the grunt of lifting. Above, a window cracks open, then quickly shuts again. Some forms of knowledge are best received indirectly. No one can quite agree whether night soil men are unlucky because of what they carry, or lucky because they remove it before it becomes everyone's problem. An old belief says you should never wish them good morning until their cart is past your door, lest your own household accounts turn foul. Another says if one nods to you before sunrise, your garden beans will thrive. This is the sort of superstition that feels invented by gardeners with strong opinions and weak evidence. When the men return, the cart settles lower on its wheels. One of them sprinkles ash over the stones, and the other hangs a twist of herbs from the cart rail wormwood, mint and rue, tied with brown thread. Whether it freshens the air is doubtful. Whether it makes the workers feel less abandoned by polite society is more likely. In medieval houses, herbs do many kinds of work. They season pottage, sweeten rushes, comfort the sick, guard thresholds, and sometimes bravely lose battles against smells older than government. You move on with them past dark kitchens and sleeping stables. Here and there, householders have left covered tubs near back gates. A cook in a wool shawl waits with a candle cupped in both hands, her hair tucked under a linen cap. She thanks the men quietly and gives them each a chunk of coarse bread with a smear of dripping. One man tucks his away for later, the other eats at once, standing under an eave while rainwater taps his cap. His face is tired, but not ashamed. Shame belongs more properly to those who need the work and despise the worker. The lane opens near the old town ditch, where mist lies low and frost glitters along the grass. Beyond the wall, fields stretch pale under the waking sky. In some seasons, such waste is carried out to be sold as fertilizer, feeding cabbages, beans, barley, and the humble turnip, which has never been glamorous but has saved more lives than many kings. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the town fears this cart because it is dirty, or because it reveals too clearly how close bread and filth stand in the circle of survival. A monk from the nearby hospital gate appears, wrapped in a dark cloak, holding a beeswax candle sheltered inside a little pierced lantern. He speaks with one of the men about a blocked pit behind the infirmary. The words are quiet, practical, and entirely without ceremony. Behind the hospital wall, the sick lie under wool blankets, leeches sleep in jars, and bundles of dried herbs hang from rafters sage for cleansing, comfrey for wounds, lavender for calm, and rosemary because everyone agrees memory needs help in winter. Some swear that bad air carries sickness, and so sweet scents are burned in rooms where fever has passed. The night soil men listen, nod, and agree to come when the hospital bell rings twice. The monk gives them a small blessing. It is not elaborate. It does not make the cart smell better. But the taller man bows his head all the same. As the sky lightens, the town begins to stir. A baker's boy appears with flour on his sleeves. A woman shakes rushes from her doorway and scatters fresh ones inside. A carter curses lovingly at a wheel. Somewhere, the crossing sweeper's broom whispers over mud again. The rag and bone man's cart rattles in another alley, collecting the pieces of yesterday. All these sounds fold into the morning, but the night soil cart remains quieter than the rest, like a secret being moved before breakfast. The men guide it toward a postern gate, smaller than the great gate by which you entered, its oak door swollen from rain and banded with iron. The keeper there is half awake, wrapped in a cloak, chewing something that may once have been bread. He opens without comment. Perhaps comment would be unwise. Perhaps he has learned that some services should pass unchallenged. The cart rolls through into the damp field path beyond the wall. Outside, the air changes. It is colder, cleaner, touched by river mist and the faint sweetness of frost on dead grass. The mule breathes white clouds. Rooks shift in the bare trees. In the east, a pale seam of gold opens under the clouds. Not bright enough to warm you yet, but enough to show the road ahead. The men stop near a low fence place beyond the ditch, where their load will be managed away from the streets, though never truly away from life. One wipes his hands with straw and ash. The other rinses a tool in a narrow runnel of water. They work without complaint, and you understand that the town's comfort rests not on grand halls alone, not on abbots, lords, merchants, or carved stone saints, but on such labour done in the half-dark by people whose names vanish before the market opens. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether forgotten jobs disappear because they are unimportant, or because everyone depends on them too much to look directly at them. You stand by the ditch with cold hands hidden in your sleeves, listening to the mule crop at frozen weeds, and the thought settles over you as softly as ash. When the cart turns back toward the postern, the town beyond the wall has begun to glow with window light. Smoke rises from chimneys. The first market voices stir, but along the main street, where last night's fog still clings to the stones, Another worker waits for his hour, a man with a long pole, a little ladder, and a covered flame, ready to wake the lamps one by one as evening will come again. Because darkness is patient, and so are those paid to answer it. You return through the postern gate with the smell of frost still clinging to your cloak, and the town receives you again with smoke, stone, and the low murmur of waking mouths. The night soil cart slips away behind a row of sheds, already fading from public memory, while the mule's hoofbeats soften into the lane. Above the roofs, the morning has climbed into a pale grey day, and the hours pass with the slow turning of work bread cooling on boards, hides soaking in vats, rags being weighed, rushes being shaken, tolls being argued over with a passion usually reserved for inheritance disputes. You spend the day moving as the town moves, never quickly, never far from damp stone. Rain comes and goes, it taps on shutters, beads on market awnings, and gathers in the same stubborn ruts the crossing sweeper cleared before dawn. The dog follows in loose circles, accepting scraps from people of questionable judgment. By afternoon, he appears to know more residents than you do. Then evening begins to lower itself over the town once more. The air turns blue around the roof lines. Smoke rises straighter in the cold. A monastery bell rings for the late office, and its sound spreads gently through alleys where women pull laundry from lines. Apprentices shut shop fronts, and old men settle by hearths with the solemnity of kings taking thrones. You stand near the chapel wall when the lamplighter arrives, carrying a long pole with a little flame guarded at its end, a short ladder over one shoulder, and a pouch of tools at his belt. His cap is dark with rain. His beard is silvered with mist. His face has the calm expression of a man who has made peace with bad weather, because bad weather refused to negotiate. He nods to you and sets his ladder under the first lamp. The lamp hangs from an iron bracket, its glass clouded, its frame black with soot. In this older-looking town, some lamps burn oil, some tallow, some whatever the town council has paid for while pretending not to be cheap. The lamplighter opens the little door, trims the wick with small shears, lifts his guarded flame, and waits for a breath. Nothing happens. Then a bead of fire catches. The lamp glows, weak at first, then steady, turning the wet wall gold. It is a small miracle, repeated so often that people forget to be grateful. No one can quite agree whether the first lamp of evening should be lit near a church, a gate, or a tavern. The priest says church, the guards say gate, and the tavern keeper argues that men find their way toward God more safely after finding their way out of his alehouse. The lamplighter, who prefers peace, lights them in the order the street gives him and lets theology wait. You walk beside him as he moves from bracket to bracket. The pole rises, the flame touches, the glass warms, and another small moon appears. Along the lane, colours deepen: red shutters, blue doorposts, green moss between stones, brown rushes swept into corners. Wet cobbles catch each lamp and hold it trembling. A woman carrying pottage in a covered pot pauses to thank him. A butcher's apprentice ignores him completely, then nearly steps into a puddle deep enough to baptize his boot. Gratitude, like light, is unevenly distributed. The lamplighter tells you that wicks must be trimmed just so. Too long, and they smoke. Too short, and they sulk. He carries spare wick, a rag for soot, a little knife, and a charm of pierced bone tied inside his pouch. Some swear bone charms protect against falls from ladders, though the lamplighter says the better remedy is not climbing after too much ale. Medieval wisdom often improves when it becomes practical. at the corner shrine where the wax foot still sits from last night. He pauses to light the small clay lamp below the saint. The saint's painted face glows suddenly gentle. Someone has added a crust of bread and a sprig of rosemary. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such offerings seek blessing, memory, healing, or simply a sense that someone in heaven notices damp streets. The lamplighter bows his head for a moment, then moves on. You follow him toward the market square. Stalls are closing, their canvas sides tied down. The fishwife scrubs her board with sand. A baker stacks leftover coarse loaves into a basket for the poor, though he grumbles loudly enough to prove his generosity is not enjoying itself. The rag and bone man passes at the square's edge with his cart lighter than before. He raises 2 fingers in greeting. From another lane, you hear the crossing sweeper's broom, still at war with the earth. Lamp after lamp blooms across the square. Their glow does not banish darkness. It softens it, shapes it, makes islands where people can stand, bargain, gossip, or find the latch to their own door. Before lamps, the town was only shadow and memory. Now it becomes a map of warm points, each one saying, "Here, here, here." The dog trots ahead and sits under the newest light, as if posing for a stained glass window devoted to hunger. Near the guild hall, the lamplighter climbs his short ladder. You steady it without being asked. The wood is slick under your hands. Above. He opens the lamp, and for a moment his face is lit from below, making him look like a minor prophet of municipal maintenance. He trims the wick, touches flame to it, and closes the glass. The lamp flares too brightly, then settles. He thanks you, climbs down, and says there are nights when wind blows half the lamps out before he reaches the last street. Then he must begin again. You think of the crossing sweeper returning to the same mud after the cartwheel ruined his path, of the night soil men making their silent rounds, of the pure finder searching the gutters before dawn. So much of a life here is not victory over disorder, but a patient reply to it. Sweep again, light again, bake again, pray again, sleep, wake, and do it again, preferably with fewer fleas. A cold wind moves through the square, stirring cloak hems and sending smoke sideways from a brazier. The lamplighter shields his flame inside a horn cover. The link boy from last night appears near the chapel steps, his cracked lantern ready for hire. For a brief moment, the 2 lights face one another, the town's official flame and the boy's wandering one. They nod, as workers do when they share a kingdom nobody else sees. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether lamps make streets safer because thieves fear light, or because honest people grow braver when they can see their own feet. Either way, the town relaxes by degrees. Doors remain open a little longer. Voices linger near thresholds. A woman crosses the lane without calling for help. An old man finds his dropped key before panic can carry him away. At last, you reach the lower street near the riverward slope. Fog thickens there, silver under the new lamps. The lamplighter has one more row to tend before supper iron brackets leaning over wet stones, their glass panes dark and expectant. He works slowly, touching flame to wick, until the lane glimmers like a chain laid gently through mist. Beyond the last lamp, the road descends toward the river, where the air smells of mud, reeds, cold water, and hidden things left by tide and trade. In the dimness below, you can see small bent figures moving along the bank, searching with sticks and bare hands where the river has drawn back. The lamplighter closes his flame cover and looks down that way. "Mind the mud," he says. This advice, you're beginning to learn, may be the unofficial motto of civilization. You thank him and step toward the river path, while behind you the lamps burn patiently in the wet evening, and ahead the mud waits dark and shining, full of lost coins, broken nails, buttons, bones, and luck. You descend toward the river by the lamplighter's last pool of light, and the town behind you grows softer with every step. The lamps remain strung along the lane like small patient stars, but ahead the river keeps its own darkness, broad and breathing, with mist lifting from its surface and reeds whispering along the bank. The stones underfoot turn slick, then broken, then half buried in mud. The dog goes first, then immediately regrets his confidence when one paw sinks deeper than expected. He lifts it with grave offence, as though the river has behaved without proper manners. Below the quay, where the water has drawn back for the evening, the mudlarks are already searching. They are mostly children, though a few thin adults move among them, bent low beneath old cloaks and shawls. They carry sticks, little baskets, broken knives, bits of sackcloth, and hands toughened by cold. The river mud shines black in the lamplight and moon haze, wrinkled with tide marks, scattered with straw, shells, scraps of rope, splinters of wood, and the lost leavings of the town. Boats creak against their posts. A barge rope groans. Somewhere under the bridge, water slaps stone with a sound like someone turning in sleep. One boy kneels ankle deep near a rotting post and pries something free, a nail, perhaps, or a bent pin. He rubs it on his sleeve, studies it, then drops it into a pouch with the seriousness of a merchant weighing silver. A girl with a red scarf finds a button made of bone and holds it up to the faint glow. It is cracked, but still useful. In a place like this, usefulness is beauty wearing a plainer coat. No one can quite agree whether the river gives things back out of kindness or mockery. Some swear it remembers every lost coin, every snapped buckle, every pilgrim badge slipped from a cloak, and returns them only when the moon is right. Others say the tide simply has no taste, and throws up whatever it cannot swallow. The mudlarks seem unconcerned with the river's philosophy. They search. You step carefully down onto the bank, and your boot sinks with a soft gulp. The cold rises at once through the leather. The mud grips as if it has been lonely all day and is delighted to meet you. Medieval travel, you decide, is mostly a long conversation between footwear and regret. A small child with a basket looks at your boots, then at your face, and says you should not stand there. You move at once, because children who live by mud often know more than scholars. A moment later, the place where you stood bubbles faintly and settles. The child nods, satisfied, and returns to scraping near a pile of broken reeds. You watch them work in the dimness. The mudlarks know where boats unload, where market waste washes down, where coins fall from careless hands, where tavern men stumble near the steps, where the bridge shadows catch scraps of trade. They know the difference between common iron and something worth carrying. They know that a buckle tongue, a bit of copper, a strip of rope, a shard of glass, a fish hook, or a lump of coal can mean food, warmth, or trade. They gather what the water loosens and the town forgets. Near the bridge stairs, an old woman sits on an overturned crate, sorting finds by touch, nails in one bowl, bones in another, cloth scraps over her knee, and small oddments tucked into a pouch. Beside her burns a rushlight, smoky and low, stuck upright in a lump of clay. The flame bends whenever the river wind passes. She tells you that iron found in river mud is strong against ill-wishing if carried in the left pocket. Some swear a bent nail from under a bridge keeps away toothache, even now. It is hard to tell whether this charm works, but the town has no shortage of toothache and only so much patience for barber surgeons. The dog sniffs a mudlark's basket and receives a stern warning from the girl in the red scarf. He sits beside you, wounded by injustice, while she returns to her work with the authority of someone twice his size in spirit. From above, the lamplighter's row glows faintly through the mist. Behind it, the town murmurs wheels on cobbles, a distant laugh, the thud of a door, the soft clang of a smith closing his shutters. Ahead, the river opens into dark water, carrying reflections of lamps, stars, and warehouse windows in long, trembling strips. On the far bank, willow trees lean low, their branches trailing like loosened hair. Some say spirits hide beneath willows and count the names of those who cross water after dark. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the spirits are dangerous, lonely, or merely nosy. A mudlark boy finds a small coin and freezes. The others notice at once. For a moment there is no sound but the river. Then he slips it into his mouth for safekeeping, which makes every adult nearby sigh with the weary understanding that children are often practical in horrifying ways. The old woman orders him to spit it into her hand. He does, reluctantly. She wipes it on her apron, squints, and declares it real enough to matter. He grins, a quick flash in the dark. You crouch beside the girl with a red scarf as she works a button loose from a clot of mud. Her fingers are red with cold, but nimble. She says buttons sell better in pairs, unless they are fancy, in which case loneliness adds mystery. This sounds like market wisdom disguised as poetry. She has also found a little pilgrim badge shaped like a bell, green with age, its pin broken. Perhaps it once jingled on a traveller's hat. Perhaps it was bought outside a shrine by someone hoping for safe roads, sound sleep, or a cure for aching knees. Some swear river-found badges carry double blessing, having touched both holy road and living water. The girl says double blessing should fetch double price. Faith and commerce sit comfortably together when supper is uncertain. Cold deepens. The mudlarks keep moving, because stillness invites shivering. You help lift a broken plank so two boys can search beneath it. Underneath lie 3 nails, a fishbone, a strip of leather, and something that looks briefly like treasure before proving itself to be a very confident pebble. One boy pockets the pebble anyway. He says it resembles a saint's thumb. You decide not to argue. Many relics have begun with less. At the quay above, a watchman passes with a lantern and a cudgel, calling the hour in a voice softened by fog. He warns the mudlarks not to stay too long near the tide channel. They answer with nods that may or may not mean obedience. The river has its own schedule, older than bells, stricter than abbots. When the water turns, the mud that holds you may become the mud that keeps you. Everyone knows this, which does not stop everyone from leaning just a little farther for a glint. The old woman finally claps her hands. "Enough," she says. The tide is thinking about returning. This phrase moves through the children faster than any sermon. Baskets are gathered. Fines are tied in scraps of cloth. The boy with the coin checks twice to be sure it remains in the old woman's pouch, guarded from his own terrible ideas. You climb the bank slowly, boots pulling free with rude little sounds. At the top, you look back. The mudlarks trail upward like shadows carrying small pieces of the river's memory. The girl in the red scarf pauses to wash the pilgrim badge in a puddle, then tucks it beneath her cloak. The dog shakes one muddy paw, then another, achieving nothing except spreading the river more evenly. The lamps above glow warmer now, and the town seems almost welcoming. Yet beyond the river path, a harsher bell rings from a stone yard near the old parish poorhouse. where thin smoke rises and a wooden wheel stands under a shed roof. People there move slowly, not with the free searching of mudlarks, but with the measured weariness of those whose time is kept for them. You leave the river's dark gifts behind and follow that sterner sound through the mist, carrying with you the smell of cold water, iron, reeds, and mud, while the small bell-shaped badge glimmers once in memory like a blessing no one has priced correctly. You follow the sterner bell through the mist, away from the river's soft-sucking mud, and toward the stone yard near the parish poorhouse, where the air changes from cold water and reeds to ash, damp wool, boiled grain, and old timber. The lane here is wider but less kind. Its stones are patched badly, its walls high and plain, and the windows above you glow with a light that seems more dutiful than warm. Behind one wall, someone coughs for a long time. Behind another, a child murmurs in sleep. The dog walks close to your heel now, quieter than before, as if even he understands that not every doorway invites wagging. The poorhouse yard opens through a gate of dark oak, swollen by rain and iron-bound at the corners. A keeper lets you in with a look that weighs your cloak, your boots, your hands, and the likelihood that you're carrying anything worth stealing. Inside, a wooden treadwheel stands beneath a lean-to roof, broad and heavy, its slats worn smooth by feet. It resembles a mill wheel turned on its side by some humorless giant. Beside it hangs a rope, a bell, and a board marked with chalk lines to count the labour. In later workhouses, such wheels punish idleness, grind grain, lift water, or sometimes do nothing at all beyond making exhaustion visible. Here, in this medieval shadowed town, it feels like a cousin to the monastery bell. Both turn hours into obedience, though one is far less musical. A man with a grey beard and a wool cap stands beside the wheel. He is the treadwheel keeper, and he carries a staff not so much as a weapon, but as punctuation. He taps it once on the stone, and the people waiting beneath the shed climb onto the slats. 2 old men, a broad-shouldered woman with red hands, a young man with a limp, and a boy nearly grown but still narrow with hunger. They grip the rail and begin stepping. The wheel shifts, groans, then turns. The sound is low and wooden, a steady creak that enters your bones. Step, dip, rise. Step, dip, rise. Their bodies move but go nowhere. This is perhaps the cruelest kind of road. No one can quite agree whether the wheel teaches discipline, earns bread, or merely satisfies officials who distrust empty hands. The keeper says the turning lifts water for washing and grinding in the yard, which is true on some days. On other days, you suspect the wheel turns mostly because someone once paid for a wheel and wished to see it used. Institutions, like old boots, can be very stubborn after they have taken shape. You stand near a brazier where the fire burns low under a pot of thin soup. It smells of barley, onion, and something green that might be cabbage if treated charitably. A woman in a patched apron stirs it with a wooden paddle. She has hung dried sage and rosemary from a beam above the pot, saying they sweeten the air and keep away heaviness of spirit. Some swear rosemary strengthens memory, sage lengthens life, and onion improves nearly everything except conversation at close range. In a yard like this, every claim is welcome. The wheel turns. The keeper watches. His face is not cruel, which almost makes the scene sadder. He looks like a man who has been told that order is mercy, and he has repeated it until the words fit, if not comfortably. When the young man with the limp slips, the keeper taps the rail not hard, but sharply enough. The others adjust their rhythm so he can catch himself. For a moment, their labour becomes a kind of rough kindness. No one praises it. No one needs to. Around the yard, daily life continues in muted fragments. A girl shakes out wool blankets over a line. An old woman mends a sleeve with thread so dark it vanishes into the cloth. A clerk sits under a covered porch, scratching names into a ledger with oak gall ink, each entry drying slowly in the damp air. The ink stains his fingers black, as though the records have bitten him. Beside him is a little box of sand for blotting and a beeswax candle burned halfway down. Saved from some better room because even paperwork likes to pretend it is holy. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether the poorhouse is a refuge, a warning, or both. It gives soup, shelter, and a roof that leaks less than the sky. It also gives rules, bells, lists, and work measured by someone else's chalk. You watch the turning wheel and think of the mudlarks by the river, free to shiver where they pleased, of the night soil men, despised but moving under their own knowledge, of the crossing sweeper, poor but master of his muddy kingdom, here. Even the body's rhythm belongs to the yard. When the bell rings again, the workers step down from the wheel. They move carefully, legs unsteady from climbing a road that did not travel. The broad-shouldered woman flexes her hands and laughs once, dry as kindling. A fine pilgrimage, she says, and not one shrine at the end. It is the sort of joke people make when they refuse to let hardship own every word. Bowls are handed out, soup is ladled, coarse bread follows, thick and dark, with crusts that require determination. You sit on a low bench near the wall and warm your hands around a wooden bowl. The soup is plain, but heat rises from it, and heat is persuasive. The dog receives no bowl but positions himself beneath the bench with the patience of a minor saint awaiting recognition. A crumb falls. His faith is rewarded. Near the gate, a woman ties a blue thread around her wrist. She says it helps against aches from the wheel. The clerk says there is no record of that. She answers that pain does not wait for records, even now. It is hard to tell whether the thread eases her body or simply gives her suffering a knot to live in. Either way, she sits straighter afterward. As darkness settles beyond the yard walls, the lamps outside glow through mist, blurred and golden. The treadwheel stands still now, immense and silent, its wet wood glistening. In stillness, it seems less like a machine and more like a sleeping beast fed on steps. The keeper covers the chalkboard with a scrap of cloth, banks the brazier, and checks the gate chain. He pauses beside the wheel and rests one hand on it, almost gently. Perhaps he hates it. Perhaps he trusts it. Perhaps. Like many people in this town, he has simply learned to live beside what cannot easily be changed. A small bell rings from the women's dormer, softer than the yard bell. Blankets are folded, bowls are stacked. The clerk closes his ledger, sanded pages whispering shut. The dog rises reluctantly, having found the poorhouse bench an excellent chapel of crumbs. You step back into the lane. The night feels wider after the yard. Fog slides between lamps. The river murmurs below the quay. Somewhere far behind you, the monastery bell answers the hour with a kinder tone. Ahead, near the market wall, a small figure stands with a basket covered in cloth, calling softly to passers-by. Tiny sticks bundled with dipped ends lie inside, dree and precious, each one waiting to become flame. You move toward that faint little commerce of fire, away from the heavy wheel and into the cold street, while the taste of thin soup lingers, warm and humble, on your tongue. You move toward the market wall where the small figure waits beneath a strip of canvas tied between two iron hooks. The rain has paused, but the canvas still drips at its corners, tapping the stones with the patient sound of a clock that cannot count. Under it stands a girl with a basket held close against her body, her shawl drawn over her head, her cheeks red from cold. Inside the basket lie bundles of matches, each little stick tipped and wrapped. Dry beneath a square of cloth as carefully guarded as relics in a monastery chest. She is the match girl, though in this older town her trade feels like the youngest child of many ancient labours, the rushlight maker, the charcoal burner, the candle seller, the monk trimming wicks before prayer, the housewife banking embers in ash so morning will not arrive entirely dark. She sells small beginnings of fire, not fire itself, not warmth enough to fill a room, not comfort enough to last the night, only the promise of a spark if handled well. Her voice is soft when she calls, almost swallowed by the mist. Matches, good dry matches. The words drift along the wall, past shuttered stalls and damp barrels. Some passers-by do not look at her. Some look and look away too quickly. A few stop. A cook buys one bundle, sniffing suspiciously to be sure it has stayed dry. A carter buys two and tucks them into an oiled pouch as if they are royal documents. A young apprentice asks the price, then pats his empty purse and leaves with an embarrassed grin. The girl gives him one match anyway, loose and small. He bows with theatrical dignity, which is very grand for a boy whose hat has a hole in it. No one can quite agree whether giving away the first flame of the evening brings luck or loss. The girl says her mother swore it brought customers. Her aunt swore it brought poverty. Her grandmother, wiser than both, said luck often follows whoever has supper. This is difficult doctrine, but convincing. You stand near her beneath the dripping canvas and feel the cold slowly gather at your cuffs. The dog sits beside the basket, pretending he is not interested in anything except moral support. The match girl watches him with narrowed eyes. She has the look of someone who has lost food to dogs before and intends not to provide history with a sequel. Around you, the market is nearly closed. Canvas stalls droop in the damp. The fish tables are washed with sand and water. The baker's leftover loaves sit in a covered tray, their crusts dark and hard. A woman sells onions from a sack, 3 for a farthing, muttering that onions are better company than most men because at least they reveal at once that they will make you weep. Nearby, a man with pilgrim badges sewn across his hat bargains for a bundle of matches and asks whether they are blessed. The girl says they are dry, which is better for lighting fires. He considers this and agrees. Behind the wall, the monastery bell rings again, a slow sound that settles into the street like wool over cold knees. You imagine the monks in their chapel, candles glowing on the altar, wax pooling in little golden tears, chant rising into rafters blackened by generations of breath and smoke. Here outside, the match girl cups her hands around one struck flame to prove her wares. It flares bright, sulphurous and sharp, lighting her face for a heartbeat. Then she shakes it out quickly, because a demonstration must not become generosity by accident. Some swear matches smell like the devil's kitchen. Others say that is only the sulphur, and sulphur has enough troubles without being blamed for theology. The girl keeps a sprig of dried lavender in the basket to sweeten it. Whether it helps is uncertain. The scent of sulphur, damp wool, fried onions, horse sweat, and cold stone forms an alliance not easily defeated by one brave flower. A woman in a fur-lined cloak stops under the canvas. You remember seeing her near the gate last night, keys at her belt, stepping around puddles with practised certainty. She buys several bundles and asks the girl whether she has eaten. The girl hesitates, which is answer enough. The woman reaches into her own basket and gives her a folded piece of coarse bread with a strip of smoked fish tucked inside. The girl accepts it with both hands, eyes lowered, murmuring thanks. The dog sees the smoked fish. The dog believes deeply in shared blessings. The girl lifts one finger, and the dog, somehow understanding the entire legal code of hunger, lies down with a sigh. You watch the girl eat slowly between customers. She does not devour the bread, though you suspect she could. She takes small bites, perhaps to make it last, perhaps because being watched makes hunger shy. The fish is salty and smoky, the bread is dense. Steam rises from a nearby brazier where chestnuts roast in an iron pan, and the smell drifts under the canvas, warm and teasing. Medieval streets, like all streets, have a talent for placing comfort just outside a poor person's reach. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the match girl is more child or merchant. Her hands are small, but her eyes count coins quickly. She knows which customers will bargain, which will pity, which will lecture, and which will try to take 2 bundles after paying for 1. She keeps the basket strap looped around her wrist. She stands with her back to the wall. She has learned the geometry of survival canvas overhead, lamp to the left, escape through the stall gap. Dog possibly useful but unreliable unless bribed. An old man buys a single bundle and tells her to keep the matches away from damp rushes, lest the house smoke all night. He also tells her that sleeping with a coal under the bed cures chills. She nods politely after he leaves and whispers to you that sleeping with a coal under the bed cures being alive in a house fire. This is the driest joke of the night, and you nearly laugh aloud, but the street is too soft for it, so the laugh comes only as warmth in your chest. The lamplighter passes at the far end of the market, checking his earlier work. One lamp has guttered, and he lifts his pole to coax it back. The match girl watches him with open admiration. To her, he must seem wealthy in flame, walking the town with light to spare. He sees her, comes over, and without ceremony buys a bundle. She straightens as she gives it to him. It is a small exchange, but it carries the dignity of guilds and charters. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether flame belongs first to hearth, altar, forge, or road. Tonight it belongs briefly to the girl's basket, to the lamplighter's pole, to the chapel candles, to the brazier's coals, to every hand that reaches into cold and asks for a little brightness. The market thins. The woman with onions ties her sack. The chestnut seller covers his pan. The fur-cloaked woman vanishes into a lane of blue doors and iron knockers. The match girl counts her coins under the cloth, lips moving silently. She has sold enough to go home with bread, perhaps even enough to buy a cup of hot ale thinned with spice. That thought seems to lift her shoulders. Then from a nearby kitchen doorway, a servant calls for ashes to be carried out, and the warm smell of roast turnip, soot, and banking embers spills into the street. Inside, beyond the open door, a small soot-black figure lies curled beside the hearth, asleep on a sack. His face smudged dark, his knees drawn close beneath a ragged blanket. The match girl covers her basket and nods toward him. "Chimney boy," she says quietly. You look from her small bundles of waiting flame to the child sleeping beside the ashes, and the town seems to grow still around that doorway. Behind you, the market lamps tremble in the mist. Ahead, the kitchen glows with low red heat. You step toward it carefully, carrying the memory of struck sulphur and smoked fish, while the dog follows with sudden hope that kitchens, unlike markets, may have looser laws about crumbs. You step into the kitchen glow, and warmth closes around you like a heavy wool blanket. After the market wall, the room feels almost impossibly generous. Red coals under the hearth, steam clouding the low rafters, hanging herbs drying upside down from beams, and the rich smell of turnip, onions, barley, grease, smoke, and old stone. Rushes cover the floor in a worn layer, mixed with rosemary and sweet flag to keep the room from smelling entirely like boots and boiled cabbage, though the boots are making a respectable argument. Near the hearth, curled on a sack with soot in his hair and across his cheeks, sleeps the chimney climber. He is small enough to seem folded, knees tucked, one arm under his head, his blanket patched from cloth that may once have been 3 different garments. His hands are blackened, his lashes are dusted grey. A little brush lies beside him, along with a scraper, a rope, and a cap stiff with soot. In later cities, boys like him climb narrow chimneys where no grown body can pass. Here, in this smoky town of old hearths and crooked flues, the work feels like something the walls themselves have swallowed. The cook, a broad woman with flour on one sleeve and a wooden spoon in her hand, nods for you to come nearer but points firmly to a stool away from the work table. Kitchens have laws older than kingdoms. You sit where you're told. The dog, recognizing authority, lies under the stool and begins a campaign of silent hope. No one can quite agree whether soot brings luck to a household or only proves the chimney badly needs attention. Some swear a smudge on the forehead protects children from fever. Others say soot scattered at the threshold keeps witches from entering, because witches, apparently, are very particular about floors. The cook says soot mostly falls into the pottage when no one has swept properly, and that is why chimney boys are fed before being sent away. She lifts the lid from a pot and stirs slowly. The firelight shines on her face, on the iron hooks above the hearth, on strings of onions hanging like dull moons, on a row of trenchers stacked by the wall. The chimney boy stirs but does not wake. His sleep is deep and sudden, the sleep of a body that has spent the day squeezing through darkness above other people's fires. A servant girl brings him a wooden bowl of thick pottage and sets it near the hearth to keep warm. For when he wakes, she whispers, as though loud speech might startle the soot from him. She tells you he came before dawn to sweep the hall chimney, then the bakehouse flue, then the narrow stack above the steward's room, where a jackdaw once nested and filled the shaft with twigs, wool, and one stolen silver spoon. Some swear jackdaws steal only shining things. The cook says they steal anything not nailed down, which makes them less like birds and more like certain relatives. You look upward into the great hood of the hearth. Smoke curls along the stones before finding its way out, reluctant as a monk leaving bed for matins. The flue is narrow, crooked, and black. It is easy to imagine the boy climbing into it with his brush, knees and elbows pressed against soot-slick walls, calling down softly when the blockage loosens. You do not imagine it too long. This story is meant to carry sleep, not tighten the chest, so you turn instead to the warmth. The small mercy of the bowl, the way the cook keeps glancing at the boy to be sure the blanket has not slipped. Even now, it is hard to tell whether households fear dirty chimneys more because of fire, smoke, bad air, or old stories. A blocked chimney can fill a room with choking fumes, sour the bread oven, spoil meat hung to smoke, or send sparks into thatch. Yet people also whisper of chimney shadows, little black spirits that gather where soot is left too long. The servant girl says if you hear scratching in the flue after midnight, you must say a prayer before looking up. The cook says if you hear scratching, you should first check for birds. The cook, you notice, has a sturdy faith in practical causes. At last, the chimney boy wakes. His eyes open slowly, unfocused in the red light. For a moment he seems unsure whether he is in a kitchen, a chimney, or some dream between the two. Then he sees the bowl. This restores him to the world. He sits up, rubbing soot across one cheek in an entirely new pattern, and eats with both hands wrapped around the wood. The pottage is barley thick, with soft turnip and a little salt pork. Steam rises against his face. The dog inches forward. The boy looks down. The dog looks up. Some negotiations require no shared language. A crust falls. Justice is served. The cook gives you a slice of coarse bread spread with dripping and tells you to eat before it cools. You do. The bread is rough, the dripping salty, and together they taste like shelter. Rain taps at the shutters. Somewhere beyond the kitchen wall, the market is nearly silent. Somewhere farther still, the river mud is taking back its footprints. The town is drawing its workers inward one by one, into corners of heat, straw, bench, sack, and blanket. The chimney boy tells the cook that the upper flue is cleared, though the bend near the roof still draws poorly. He says this with professional seriousness, like a master mason discussing a cathedral vault. Then he adds that he found a charm tucked in the soot, a strip of cloth knotted around a chicken bone. The servant girl crosses herself. The cook rolls her eyes, but not completely. No one can quite agree whether such charms are put there to protect the house from fire or to keep secrets from rising out through the chimney. The boy says he left it where it was. A wise choice, perhaps. Some mysteries are load-bearing. The cook settles a wool blanket more firmly around his shoulders. She complains while doing it, because open tenderness might spoil her reputation. He accepts both blanket and complaint with equal calm. You stay until the fire burns lower. The kitchen becomes softer, quieter. The boy's head nods over his empty bowl. The servant girl sweeps ash into a careful pile for morning use, because ash scours pots, sweetens certain soils, and makes soap when treated properly. Nothing here is merely waste. Even soot has its price, ash its purpose, bones their buyer, rags their future, mud its hidden coins. Then a small bell rings in the passage beyond the kitchen, sharp and bright. The cook glances toward the cellar stairs and mutters that the rat-catcher must have arrived early. At once, the dog lifts his head with sudden interest, all crumb dreams forgotten. From the passage comes another sound, a faint skitter beneath boards, then the soft chime of little bells tied somewhere low. The chimney boy smiles sleepily from his blanket. "That'll be his terrier," he says. You rise from the stool, thank the cook, and step toward the passage where the candlelight thins. Behind you, the hearth glows red and steady. The soot-covered child curls back into warmth, and ahead, under the floor and behind the grain bins, another old trade begins to move through the sleeping house. You follow the thin candlelight into the passage, where the warmth of the kitchen falls away behind you and the air grows cooler, sharper, and edged with the smell of stone, grain, damp wood, and old straw. The dog trots ahead with his ears lifted, suddenly alert in a way he has not been for mud, bells, saints, or municipal lighting. Somewhere beneath the boards comes another faint skitter, quick as a thought one would rather not have, and then a tiny bell gives a bright little chime. At the cellar stair stands the rat-catcher. He's a compact man in a dark patched coat, with leather gaiters, a cap pulled low, and a belt hung with pouches, traps, cords, a little knife, and a bundle of herbs tied with black thread. Beside him waits a terrier no larger than a loaf basket and far more confident than most knights. 3 small bells are tied to the dog's collar, not for decoration, but to mark where he darts in darkness. The kitchen dog freezes at the sight of him. The terrier stares back with professional disdain. It is a very small duel, but the tension is enormous. The rat-catcher nods to you, then to the cook, who has followed as far as the doorway with her wooden spoon still in hand. "Granary first," she says, "then cellar." Her tone suggests that if the rats have touched the winter barley, she will take it personally, possibly legally. No one can quite agree whether rats come because grain is stored badly, because houses are old, or because the devil has poor taste in pets. Some swear rats abandon a building before sickness arrives. Others say they bring sickness with them. The rat-catcher says rats come where food comes, which makes them less mysterious and more honest than many tax collectors. You descend with him into the cellar. The steps are slick, hollowed in the middle from years of feet, and the candle flame leans with each cold breath of air rising from below. At the bottom, barrels line one wall. Sacks of barley and oats sit raised on planks. Smoked fish hangs from hooks near the ceiling, wrapped in cloth against flies and paws. A row of clay jars holds vinegar, oil, and salted things you do not examine too closely. The floor is strewn with dry rushes and a little ash to show tracks. In one corner, tiny marks cross the dust. The rat-catcher crouches. His terrier crouches too. The dog behind you attempts to crouch as well, mostly because everyone else is doing it. The man studies the marks by candlelight. "Bold ones," he murmurs, "not hungry only. Settled." He reaches into a pouch and draws out a trap made of wire and wood. Clever and unpleasant without being dramatic. He sets it near a wall, baits it with a crumb of cheese, and places 2 more along the line where the floor meets stone. Then he takes a pinch of dried mint and tansy from his bundle and sprinkles it near a crack. Some swear strong herbs drive rats from nesting places. The rat-catcher says herbs mostly tell him where the cook has already tried and failed. The terrier's bells tremble. A skitter answers from behind a barrel. The rat-catcher lifts one finger. Everyone stills, even the kitchen dog, who has never respected silence before, seems to understand that this is not a moment for commentary. The terrier slips forward, low and quick, bells giving the faintest chime. There is a rustle, a scrape, a sudden thump behind the barrel. The cook whispers a prayer upstairs, though whether for victory or restraint is unclear. The rat-catcher moves with practised calm, shifting the barrel just enough, blocking one gap with his boot, another with a folded sack. The terrier darts. A rat shoots across the floor like spilled shadow. You step back before dignity can consider the matter. The kitchen dog lunges half a heartbeat too late and collides with a sack of oats. The sack survives. His pride does not. The terrier returns, tail high, bells ringing once. The rat-catcher praises him softly, not loudly, because good workers do not need speeches. He resets the trap, checks the walls, and listens again. There is more movement deeper in the granary passage. You follow him into the storeroom where winter provisions are kept: sacks, bins, cheeses under cloth, apples packed in straw, onions in ropes, smoked meat hanging from hooks, and jars sealed with wax. Here is the town's quiet fear made visible. Winter is not a season here so much as a long question: have you stored enough, dried enough, salted enough, prayed enough, kept the rats out enough? A single gnawed sack is not just a nuisance. It is thinner soup in February. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the old charms nailed over granary doors are for rats, thieves, hunger, or hope. This door has a horseshoe, a rowan twig, and a scrap of parchment marked with a cross. The rat-catcher taps the horseshoe and says it has caught fewer rats than his terrier, but likely costs less to feed. This is a fair assessment. He sets more traps, then kneels by a hole near the skirting board. From another pouch he draws a little cage with a tame white rat inside, pink-eyed and calm. You blink at it. He notices your surprise and smiles faintly. Some rat-catchers keep such creatures to draw wild ones, to prove skill, or to sell as curiosities to those with more money than judgment. No one can quite agree whether a tame rat is a marvel, a warning, or an insult to housekeeping. The terrier ignores it, suggesting professional boundaries. The rat-catcher tells you that people fear what they do not see until it has already eaten through a sack. They call him after hearing scratches in walls, finding droppings in flour, or seeing the cat refuse a corner. Cats, he says, are useful when they wish to be, which is less a job description than a temperament. The kitchen cat, appearing at that very moment from behind a cheese crate, looks at everyone with mild contempt and leaves again. This supports his argument beautifully. After a while, he climbs back to the passage and follows the sound of bells into a lower hall near the servants' quarters. There, beneath benches and behind baskets of firewood, he searches with the lantern held low. The chimney boy, wrapped in his blanket, has shuffled to the doorway to watch, his soot-smudged face solemn with interest. The match girl peers from outside the kitchen door, basket on her arm, perhaps hoping to sell another bundle, perhaps drawn by the tiny drama of bells and paws. The terrier works the corners, quick and eager. The kitchen dog tries to assist by sniffing very loudly in places where nothing has happened for years. The rat-catcher pats him anyway. Kindness, like crumbs, should not be wasted. At last, the work slows, traps are set, holes are marked for mending with tin and mortar. The cook receives instructions to lift sacks higher, seal the cracked bin, and stop blaming ghosts for noises behind the wall. Some swear this house has a knocking spirit, she says. The rat-catcher points gently toward the gnawed wood. It has teeth. He replies, that narrows the matter. The cook pays him in coins, bread, and a small wrapped piece of cheese that he pockets with visible satisfaction. The terrier receives a scrap of meat. The kitchen dog receives nothing, then looks so wounded that the chimney boy gives him a crust from his sleeve. Thus order returns to the world. You step back into the lane with the rat-catcher as the night deepens. His terrier's little bell sounds softly at his heel. Lamps glow in the fog. The monastery bell has long since faded, and the town rests uneasily, full of stored grain, sleeping children, banked fires, hidden holes, and the small persistent lives under floors. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether a rat-catcher knows a town better than a mayor, but you begin to suspect he does. He knows where food is kept, where walls fail, where fear begins, and which households pay promptly. He also knows which dogs deserve scraps, which may be the highest wisdom of all. Ahead, beyond the sleeping market and the shuttered alehouses, another worker moves before dawn with a pole in hand, tapping high windows to wake those who must rise while dreams still cling to their blankets. The rat-catcher turns one way, his bells fading into mist, and you turn another, following the dark street toward the hour before morning. You follow the dark street toward the hour before morning, when the town is not quite night and not yet day, and every sound seems to travel farther than it should. The rat-catcher's little bells fade behind you, swallowed by mist and stone, while ahead the lanes lie still beneath the lamps the lamplighter woke the evening before. Some burn steadily, some shiver. One has gone out entirely, leaving a patch of darkness under a leaning house where rain drips from the eaves like a clock with a cold. The dog walks beside you, quieter now, perhaps tired from failing to become a professional rat assistant. Your boots remember the river mud, your cloak remembers the market smoke. Somewhere in your sleeve, you find a single straw from the poorhouse yard, which seems determined to travel farther in life than expected. At the corner by the shuttered baker's shop, a man stands with a long pole in his hand. He wears a heavy cloak, fingerless gloves, and a cap pulled down over his ears. A horn lantern hangs from his belt, its flame low and amber. His pole is tipped with a small knob wrapped in leather, not sharp enough to break glass, but firm enough to make a sleeping worker regret dreams. This is the knocker-up, the tapper of windows, the keeper of other people's mornings. He looks at the sky, then at the row of upper rooms along the lane. Late, he mutters, though the world appears painfully early. Then he raises his pole and taps a shutter high above. Tap, tap, tap. A pause. Tap, tap. Behind the shutter comes a groan so sorrowful it might be mistaken for a haunting. Then a voice answers, thick with sleep. The knocker-up lowers his pole and marks something on a little board with chalk. His work is not to wake the whole town. Only those who have paid him bakers' apprentices, carters, washerwomen, factory hands in later streets, market sellers, servants, porters, and anyone whose bread depends on rising before the bell can be trusted to pity them. No one can quite agree whether waking by pole is kinder than waking by rooster. Roosters at least believe in their calling, but they are terrible at appointments. The knocker-up, by contrast, keeps a list. You walk with him as he moves along the lane. At one window, he taps 3 times, waits, then taps again until a woman opens the shutter and hisses that she's awake. Saints preserve her from men with sticks. He gives a polite nod, entirely untroubled. At another house, he uses a handful of dried peas blown through a hollow reed to rattle against the glass, because the window stands too far back beneath the eave. The sound is soft but sharp, like rain learning manners. Some swear it is unlucky to speak your first word of the day in anger, so the woman who answers the next window says only bread, which may be prayer, complaint, or occupation. The knocker-up accepts it as proof of life and moves on. The lane smells of cold ash, damp shutters, stable straw, and the first faint promise of baking. Behind one door, someone has banked a fire under ash all night, and now a servant kneels to coax it awake with a spill of wood and a whispered charm. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the charm summons flame or steadies the hand, but the ember glows, catches, and becomes a small red eye in the dark. Fire, like people, often needs persuasion before dawn. The knocker-up's board is covered with marks, circles, crosses, short strokes, little initials. He knows which window belongs to the baker's boy, which to the washerwoman with the bad hip, which to the porter who sleeps through thunder, and which to the young apprentice who claims he wakes easily and lies like a minstrel seeking supper. The knocker-up taps that one longer. At last, a face appears behind the shutter, hair wild, eyes offended. "I heard you." "Aye," says the knocker-up. The third time, this is said without triumph, which makes it much worse. You pass beneath a row of houses leaning over the lane, their beams black and wet, their lower doors bolted with iron. A small shrine has been set into a wall beside a stair, no larger than a bread box, with a clay figure of St. Peter holding a key nearly as large as himself. Someone has left a tiny iron key beside him, rusted and bent. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such offerings help open heaven, heal locked joints, or find missing doors after too much ale. The knocker-up touches the brim of his cap as he passes. A man who works with thresholds respects keys. The monastery bell rings once in the distance, too early for comfort, too late for those already awake. Its note spreads over rooftops, over sleeping halls, over the tanner's lane, the market wall, the river bank, the poorhouse yard, and the kitchen where the chimney boy perhaps still sleeps near the hearth. The bell does not care who is ready. Bells rarely do. At a narrow house near the old grain store, the knocker-up stops and taps gently, almost tenderly. A child's cough answers before the shutter opens. A woman appears, wrapped in a wool blanket, her face pale in the lantern light. She nods to him. He nods back and does not mark the board until she has fully opened both eyes. Afterward, he tells you she washes linen for the hospital and must heat water before dawn. Her husband once paid for the waking. Now the parish does, sometimes late. He says this plainly, not as gossip, but as one of the little facts by which a town continues. You move on through mist. The dog pauses at a doorway where yesterday's rushes have been swept out and fresh ones wait in a bundle. A sprig of lavender lies tied on top with blue thread. Some swear lavender under the threshold keeps nightmares from crossing into the house. You think of all the workers you've seen and wonder who keeps nightmares from crossing into their sleep. Perhaps no one. Perhaps the body simply grows too tired to dream loudly. Near the market square, the knocker-up's work gathers speed. More shutters must be tapped. More sleepers must be pulled from warmth. A fish seller needs waking before the carts arrive. A costermonger must fetch apples, onions, and greens. A porter must meet a wagon at the gate. A girl who sells matches has asked for a knock if frost lies heavy, because cold customers buy fire faster. The knocker-up raises his pole and taps her window lightly, only twice. Her voice answers at once. Small but ready. The dog wags, remembering smoked fish. Hope is a durable form of memory. As the eastern sky pales, the town begins to change around you. Not wake all at once, but stir in layers. First shutters, then hearths, then footsteps, then coughs, buckets, door bars, whispered prayers, the clatter of a pail, the scrape of a broom. Smoke rises from chimneys. Somewhere a rooster finally announces morning with the confidence of someone arriving after the work is done. No one can quite agree whether the knocker-up belongs to night or day. He walks in darkness, but his task is morning. He disturbs sleep, but he guards livelihood. He is welcomed, resented, paid, forgotten, and cursed affectionately by people who would be furious if he failed them. That, you begin to understand, is one of the marks of necessary work. At the edge of the square, he lowers his pole and rubs his hands together for warmth. His list is nearly finished. The first market carts creak under the gate arch. The crossing sweeper waits already with his broom. The lamplighter's lamps fade into useless gold. A bell rings from the abbey, and another answers from the town chapel. The air smells of wet straw, smoke, bread, river mud, onions, and the coming day. The knocker-up nods farewell, and turns toward a final row of windows, while you follow the growing sound of wheels and voices into the market, where a costermonger's cry begins to rise over the pale stones, bright and rough as the first bird call of trade. You follow the growing sound of wheels and voices into the market, where morning spreads not like sunrise in a painted chapel window, but like spilled flour, pale and uneven across the stones. The lamps still glow faintly, though their courage is fading. Smoke lifts from cookshop chimneys. The crossing sweeper is already at his post, drawing mud aside with the same patient rhythm you remember, while the first carts push through the gate under the grumble of guards, toll clerks, and horses who would rather be anywhere with hay. Then the costermonger's cry rises, apples, onions, greens fresh enough for honest teeth. It is not exactly music, but it is alive. The voice belongs to a broad young man in a patched brown coat, standing beside a handcart piled with baskets, winter apples with wrinkled skins, onions in golden nets, leeks dark with soil, cabbages folded tight as monks in cold choir, carrots still wearing the field, and a few pears so bruised they seem to have lived interesting lives. He calls again, louder, shaping the words to travel beneath awnings and over heads. No one can quite agree whether a costermonger's best tool is his cart, his voice, or his ability to flatter a cabbage. This one appears skilled in all three. He holds up an onion and calls it round as a bishop's blessing, which feels generous to the onion and risky toward bishops. You stand near his cart as the market wakes. A fishwife slaps smoked fish onto a board. A baker arranges coarse loaves in rows, each one dark, sturdy, and capable of surviving minor siege conditions. A woman with a blue shawl sells eggs from a basket padded with straw. The match girl appears beneath the market wall, shawl tight, basket covered, already alert. The dog sees her and sits with sudden politeness, which fools absolutely no one. The costermonger tips his cap to you as if you are an old customer. Perhaps by now you are. You have passed through enough mud and smoke to earn temporary citizenship. He offers you an apple with a small bruise near the stem. Sweet beneath the trouble, he says. This, you think, could describe half the town. The market toll clerk sits beneath a canopy with a ledger, an inkhorn, and a face arranged for disappointment. Every cart must pay. Every stall must claim its place. Every basket seems to require a mark, a coin, a nod, or a muttered protest. The clerk writes with slow authority, sanding each line so the ink will dry. Some swear that if a toll clerk misspells your name, you will have bad trade all week. Others say bad trade is caused by rain, rats, high fees, and customers who want miracles for farthings. The costermonger says both theories can be true. You move with him as he pushes the cart a little farther into the square. Its wheels creak over damp stones. He knows where to stand so the morning light catches the apples, where the baker's crowd will spill past, where servants from the better houses come looking for onions before their mistresses can complain about soup. He calls differently to each passer-by. To the cook, he praises size. To the widow, price. To the apprentice, quantity. To the monk collecting alms, humility. A cabbage becomes wholesome. A leek becomes noble. A pear becomes nearly medicinal if eaten before anyone notices the soft side. Even now, it is hard to tell whether trade is more performance or survival. The costermonger's jokes are light, but his eyes count every coin. His hands weigh produce without scales. His voice warms customers before the sun can. He gives one bruised apple to the crossing sweeper, who tucks it into his cloak for later. He trades onions for a mended strap from a leather worker. He sets aside wilted greens for soup at the poorhouse. Nothing is wasted. Only move to the person who can still make use of it. A woman from a manor kitchen arrives with 2 servants and a list tied in ribbon. The list is treated with great seriousness, though the woman ignores it almost immediately. She buys leeks, apples, onions, and a bundle of herbs, then argues over the pears. The costermonger insists they are soft with ripeness. She says they are soft with surrender. They settle on a lower price, and both look pleased in the careful way of people who intend to claim victory later. Around you, the square thickens with sound cartwheels, coins, gulls crying from the river, bells from the abbey, a knife sharpening on stone, hens complaining from a crate, a baby fussing under a wool hood, the fishwife laughing at something improper, but not too improper for breakfast. The smell is everything at once: wet straw, fresh bread, smoked fish, onions, horse sweat, damp wool, candle smoke, river mud, and crushed herbs underfoot. At the market cross, a peddler pins pilgrim badges to a cloth shells, bells, saints' hands, little flasks, tiny keys. The costermonger buys none, but he touches the bell-shaped one briefly. For safe roads, the peddler says. The costermonger replies that safe roads are mostly roads where wheels do not fall off. Still, he does not laugh when the peddler mutters a blessing. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether market charms protect goods, sellers, buyers, or simply the courage required to haggle before breakfast. You notice the rag-and-bone man passing at the far edge, collecting broken crate slats and bottle shards. The lamplighter walks the opposite way, snuffing lamps one by one, undoing his own work with the calm of a man who knows evening will hire him again. The knocker-up crosses the square with his pole tucked under one arm, buying a hot crust from the baker. The match girl sells a bundle to the chestnut man. The town's hidden workers overlap in the pale morning, no longer tucked into separate shadows, but woven together like threads in rough cloth. A sudden shout rises near the gate. A cartwheel has cracked in a rut, and the driver stands beside it, hands on head, speaking to heaven with more volume than trust. The costermonger glances over, sighs, and pulls his cart aside. Always the wheel, he says, never the hat. Hats know how to stay employed. You help push his cart clear while the crossing sweeper, a porter, and 2 apprentices gather near the broken wheel. Someone brings a wedge. Someone brings rope. The toll clerk watches with the expression of a man wondering whether delay can be taxed. The dog circles hopefully, as if broken carts traditionally contain sausages. For a while, everyone works together in the loose, practical way townspeople do when inconvenience becomes public property. The cart is lifted enough to free the wheel. The driver promises payment later, which causes several faces to become medieval stone carvings of doubt. The costermonger, seeing the delay draw customers toward him, calls out that apples remain cheaper than repairing axles. This is not exactly compassion, but it is excellent timing. By full morning, the square shines under a thin break in the clouds. Not warm, not bright, but lighter. Your hands thaw around a cup of weak ale warmed with spice from a stall near the Guildhall. The drink tastes of cinnamon, watered hope, and a little smoke. A piece of coarse bread rests in your palm. The dog has acquired half a fishtail from somewhere and looks far too pleased for innocence. The costermonger's cart is emptier now. The best apples are gone. The leeks are gone. The cabbages have found homes in baskets and kitchens. Only a few bruised pears remain, along with onion skins and bits of straw. He lowers his voice at last, saving what remains of it for afternoon, and leans against the cart as if it is a faithful animal. The bells ring again, gentler in daylight. You look back across the square and remember the old gate at dusk, the link boy's lantern, the muddy crossing, the rag-and-bone cart, the sour tanner's lane, the silent night soil cart, the lamplighter's small moons, the river mud, the tread wheel, the match flame, the chimney hearth, the rat-catcher's bells, and the tapping pole before dawn. All of it seems present here, hidden under the market's ordinary noise. The costermonger gives the last bruised pear to the match girl, who gives the dog the stem and nothing more. This is mercy with boundaries. Then the day begins to soften toward noon, and the market's first rush eases. Beyond the square, the lane toward the old gate lies open, touched with weak sun and drying mud. Somewhere ahead waits shelter, a quieter room, perhaps a bench near a low fire. Perhaps the same town seen now through the calm after labour. You step away from the cart, carrying the taste of spiced ale and onion smoke, while the last bell of morning drifts above the roofs like a hand smoothing the day flat. You step away from the costermonger's cart as the market loosens its first hard knot of morning, and the town seems to breathe out. The shouting thins. The cartwheels roll more slowly. The toll clerk closes his ledger for a moment and rubs his ink-stained fingers together as if trying to warm the very idea of order. Above the square, weak sun touches the wet roof tiles, and every drop along the eaves glows briefly before falling. You walk toward the old gate by the lane that now looks almost familiar. The crossing sweeper leans on his broom, eating the apple given to him earlier, cutting away the bruise with a small knife and wasting nothing. He nods as you pass. The mud is already creeping back into his cleared path. Patient as a tax collector, but he does not seem surprised. No one can quite agree whether mud is defeated by sweeping or merely entertained by it. The dog follows close at your heel, tired at last, though still willing to inspect every doorway for miracles involving fish. The link boy's corner is empty in daylight. The shrine beside it holds the same wax foot, the same smoky saint, and now a fresh green sprig laid across the sill. Some swear rosemary helps the dead remember the living. Others say it helps the living remember supper. Both are useful. You pass the rag and bone man's shed, the tanner's lane, the distant postern where the night soil cart vanished before dawn. You pass lamps now pale and useless, waiting for evening to need them again. Near the kitchen door, the chimney boy sits awake on the step, wrapped in his wool blanket, eating bread slowly while the cook scolds him for leaning in the draught. He smiles into his bowl and does not move. Warmth, once found, is hard to abandon. The rat-catcher crosses the lane with his terrier trotting proudly beside him. Belle's silent now. The match-girl counts her coins beneath the market wall, then tucks one bundle of matches deeper into her shawl, saved for home. The knocker-up sleeps seated on a bench under an arch, pole across his knees, chin to chest. This seems fair. A man who drags others from dreams deserves at least one of his own. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether a town is made by its walls, its bells, its market, or its people. But as you reach the gatehouse again, you feel the quieter answer under your feet. It is made by all the hands that sweep, carry, light, wake, scrape, mend, sell, gather, stir, and guard. It is made by the humble work that vanishes when done well. Inside the gatehouse, a low fire burns in a brazier. You sit near it on a wooden bench, cloak damp at the hem, boots heavy with drying mud. Smoke curls upward to the soot-black rafters. A guard eats pottage from a trencher. The dog circles twice, then lies beside your feet with a sigh so deep it seems to belong to the whole road. The bell rings once more over the town, softer now, not calling you onward, only marking that time has passed. You let your hands warm, you let your shoulders loosen. Outside, the market murmurs. Inside, the fire clicks and settles. The remembered faces drift through you like lamplight in mist. The boy with his cracked lantern, the sweeper's broom, the rag and bone cart, the river children, the woman stirring poorhouse soup, the small match flame, the soot-dusted child by the hearth. And now the town grows quieter in your mind. The lanes soften, the mud loses its grip, the bells become slower, farther away. The fire before you glows low and kind, and the dog's breathing evens beside your boots. You do not need to walk farther tonight. You do not need to count coins, carry water, trim wicks, or find your way through fog. You only sit in the old gatehouse while the last warmth gathers around you. The walls hold back the wind. The rushes lie still on the floor. A half-burned candle gutters beside the guard's cup, then steadies again. Beyond the arch, the town continues in its gentle, ordinary way, but it no longer asks anything of you. Its forgotten workers pass into memory like figures painted small in the margin of an illuminated page, each carrying a tool, a basket, a flame, a bell, a broom. Your eyes grow heavy. The fire lowers itself into embers. The stone around you feels less cold now, or perhaps you've simply grown used to it. Somewhere very far off, water moves under the bridge. Somewhere a shutter closes. Somewhere a monk turns a page by candlelight. And here, beside the quiet fire, you are safe enough for sleep. The long road rests. The town rests. Even the mud waits until morning. The last glow of the brazier settles into a deep red hush, and the gatehouse seems to breathe with you, slow and low, as though the stones themselves have learned the rhythm of sleep after centuries of watching travellers come in from the rain. The old dog twitches once beside your feet, perhaps chasing a dream of fishtails, then grows still again, warm against your boot. Outside, the lamps are not yet lit, and the day has not yet faded. But in this quiet hour everything feels softened, folded, and set aside. The market voices blur into a far murmur. The bells become memory rather than sound. The damp cloak around your shoulders grows warmer by degrees, and the straw beneath the bench smells faintly of rain, horse, and summer fields long gone. You let the town drift away piece by piece. The river releases its silver mud. The poorhouse wheel stands silent. The match-girl's basket is covered. The chimney boy sleeps near red ash. The lamplighter waits for dusk. The knocker-up dreams without tapping. The crossing sweeper's broom rests against a wall, and even the rag and bone cart is still beneath its cloth. Nothing presses now, nothing hurries. The old world dims to candlelight and ember, to wool blanket and low breath, to the softest scrape of ash settling in the hearth. You have walked through fog, market, mud, and memory, and all of it can loosen now. So rest where you are. Let your hands unclench. Let your thoughts grow slow and wide, like mist moving over a sleeping field. The gate is closed, the fire is kind, and the night, at last, asks only that you sleep.